I didn't know it at the time, but 10 years ago, my body was trying to lead me somewhere. What started as a hormonal imbalance became a journey across the world, to the Amazon, to plant medicine, to learning the wisdom of the womb, to witnessing birth in its most natural form, and slowly to remember what it means to be a woman and how plants can guide us to remembering this. This is that journey. Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel. I really wanted to do an intro video, but I thought let's just get right into it. I am the founder of a tea brand rooted in feminine wisdom, sourcing feminine herbs like Guayusa and Cacao Husk from the Ecuadorian coast and Amazon. And it has taken me so long to start my YouTube channel. I have been sharing my journey on TikTok and on Instagram. I just feel like short-term content, I'm not really resonating with it anymore because I feel like there's such an importance of showing the vulnerability in the process because I do not have a very conventional founder's journey. My brand has really forced me to heal and to show up as a certain version of myself before I've even been ready to enter certain spaces. And I think there's such a beauty in sharing that journey just to show people not everything is an overnight success, not everything is based on numbers and views and being viral. I feel like the most important part of a founder's journey is having a purpose and aligning with that purpose. Because if you don't, it is so easy to give up. And my personal journey of struggling with my health, struggling with my hormones, feeling like I was failed by the medical system really forced me to create this brand and to create this sense of awareness as well that will not just start and end with me, but will hopefully continue on. And it's taught me so many things. It's taught me how to work like a woman, how to grow like a woman. You know, we live in this 9 to 5 male hormone cycle and we're burnt out, we're exhausted, we are getting bombarded with symptoms. And I truly feel like if there's one thing I learned on my journey, it's the importance of connecting with your womb, the importance of understanding how energy travels through your body through all phases of womanhood. And an example of this is menopause. You know, menopause is something that every single woman fears in a way. And it's not a fear of, it's a fear of the unknown. Because once you truly understand what menopause is and how beautiful it is, you will welcome it with open arms. And an example of how energy moves through the body during menopause is when we enter menopause, we are entering into the wise woman phase of womanhood. The energy in our womb is now traveling up to our third eye, you know, because we no longer need that creative energy in our womb. So that energy travels up, but the pathway is through the heart and up to your third eye. And a lot of women have, you know, their hearts are closed, they're in survival, and that energy isn't able to travel seamlessly up. So it gets stuck, and that creates heat in the body, which are hot flashes. That's why so many women that experience hot flashes will say, I have tried hormone therapy, I've tried this, I've tried that, I tried this. But we are mind, body, and soul. So tending to the body just physically is not always enough. So I have recorded my journey from day one. I didn't know what I was recording it for, and it's taken me, I'm now almost a year into my brand, and it's taken me a year to post all of this footage. I've posted short clips of my time learning midwifery and natural gynecology in the Amazon, me in Ecuador, me here, me there, but I haven't really showed the raw bits and how, you know, going through these evolutions and learning all this knowledge has really forced me to let go of certain parts of myself in order to step into what's coming. So that is what I'm going to be sharing. You're going to be seeing full clips. But let's start from the beginning. When I was in high school, I suffered with a really bad hormonal imbalance. It was because my diet wasn't good. I was overtraining. I used to run competitively, and I was in a huge state of survival at the time. My cortisol was ridiculously high. Back then, we didn't really know what cortisol was and the importance of regulating that, and even the difference between the male and the female nervous system. So, I had a huge hormonal imbalance, and I didn't start menstruating until I was almost 16, turning 17. I was like really late 16s. And I went to the gynecologist, and of course, their only solution was to get on birth control. So that was the start of masking my symptoms. My preliminary symptoms were acne, weight gain, mood swings, depression, and I was struggling with this really, really bad. And my birth control was just numbing me. It was just like one big band aid. And in 2020, I decided to go visit my now husband in Namibia. We were doing distance, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go for spring break and start leaving my stuff because I was planning on moving to Namibia. And I ended up getting locked down. So when I got locked down, spring break of college, by the way. When I got locked down, this was my last year of college, I ended up staying, graduating online, and getting a job there. And during lockdown, everyone was really on a health kick, and I decided to completely get off birth control. I no longer wanted these synthetic hormones in my body, and I had found a naturopath that told me that he can help me heal my hormones through traditional Chinese medicine. And it took months. I broke out really badly. I went through all those depressive symptoms again. I gained weight, my weight was fluctuating, and I went raw vegan. I was taking supplements from my traditional Chinese medicine doctor. And after a few months, I did regulate and I was feeling better, but I felt better on a physical level. And at the time, I was newly married, and I felt so disconnected from my womanhood, like being a woman. I just felt like I was so in my masculine, and I just felt like I had so much trauma pent up that I was like, you know what? Let me start researching. I started cycle syncing, and I really ultimately started reconnecting with my womb. And that's when everything changed for me. Grounding myself and meditating never worked for me because mind based meditations are really masculine. But when I started doing womb based meditations, I started being able to learn how to regulate my nervous system, how to feel safe. I started having a womb awakening. And it was really subtle. After a few years of living in Namibia, I moved back to New York with my husband. And this is when everything changed for me. At the time, I was seeing a life coach, and I was really working on being my best self, on healing my trauma, on doing everything that I possibly could. And that is when I started, feeling called to learn more about plant medicine. And I am Ecuadorian, so I was like, you know what, I really want to go home and I really want to learn plant medicine. So I started researching different places in the Amazon, and I was set on going to the Amazon. And I started doing research, asking my family members in Ecuador to help me. And every single place I reached out to said, okay, for what you want to learn, I think it would be really beneficial for you to take ayahuasca first. And I had no idea what ayahuasca was. I had never done any type of psychedelics, and I was really stepping into my faith at this time and really, learning what it is to align myself with God and speak to God and really, follow his voice. And when I say God, I am not really religious. I'm not religious at all, but I am a follower of Christ. I think that following Christ's path is like the best way that I have learned unconditional love, what it is to truly serve, what it is to really be on this earth and live. Because at the end of the day, we weren't here to be served. We were brought here to serve, and we all have our own unique purpose. So learning more about Christ and getting closer to him is what really grounded me and really comforted me during this time. So I didn't know what ayahuasca was. And I thought that it was conflicting with my faith because of the Western narrative. And I used to tell them, like, I want to learn plant medicine, but I don't want to do ayahuasca. And they'd be like, okay, so you want to be a tourist? And I was like, no. And I didn't understand what they meant. And one day my cousin was like, hey, um, I have a friend that went to do ayahuasca. He trusts him a lot, and I trust my friend a lot. Maybe you can just reach out to him, tell him what you want to do, and maybe he can guide you. So I did. I reached out, and this isn't someone that like you can find on the internet. This is someone that is really deeply rooted in his mission in just administering ayahuasca and plant medicine and, an internal transformation. And we ended up having a call, and that call honestly changed everything for me. I felt so safe and comforted in knowing that I can ask anything that I wanted, and knowing that also his values in, following the path of Christ and, acknowledging that aligned with me. And he made it very clear that ayahuasca isn't something that you just do. It's something that requires a lot of preparation, a lot of sacrifice, and your true intention is to heal. Ayahuasca is not a drug, it is a medicine. And as I continue to share my journey and share things with him, like for a really long time, whenever I would talk to certain men, or whenever I would be around certain groups of men, I would feel like a sharp pain in my womb. And I didn't know what that was at all. And I was like, nothing really happened to me in that way. And, fast forward, I realized that this was like a generational trauma that different women in my family have experienced, that I ended up, feeling and healing in my ceremony. So, one thing that really stuck with me was during my conversation with him, I told him what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted to help women. I wanted to do something with helping women reconnect with their wombs and supporting them and learning and teaching women how to live in their feminine rhythm. And he told me, he was like, I can see you doing this 100%. Like, I think that that is your path and you need to follow that inner voice. But the reason every single lodge and every single, indigenous community was telling you to do ayahuasca is because healing cannot be given, it must be shared. And that's actually at the bottom of all of my canisters, because the concept of that is like, I would be constantly pouring from an empty cup, learning how to heal others without healing myself and without, making sure I'm okay. And that's when I truly understood what this medicine is. It is to help me heal, to help me learn to regulate myself. And from that place, now share what I want to share and serve. Because I can't serve running on empty. I can't serve with fear, with ego. And my ceremony was the biggest ego death that I have ever experienced. And ego is much more than being arrogant or having pride. It is also fear. It is doubt. It is everything holding you back from fulfilling your purpose. I decided after that call, I said, okay, I'm going to make the intention to do ayahuasca. My husband was on board, but ultimately he was really doing it for me. And a year went by of excuses. My life felt like it was absolutely falling apart. My living situations were falling apart. Me and my husband, we've been together, at that time had been together for 7 years, and love was never the issue with us. It was just, we got together very young and we needed to heal a lot of things. And we were projecting so much trauma on one another that we couldn't really get to one another on like a soul level. And we ultimately decided, like, okay, I'm going to go to Ecuador and I'm going to go heal, find my path, figure out my journey. And he was going to go back to Namibia and start his journey. And we trusted and we believed that, at the end of this, we're going to come back to each other. That was never really a doubt, but it still really hurt, and it was really hard to, say goodbye and not really know when the next time us coming together will be. So after months of having that call, I decided, I at the time didn't have a job. Um, I didn't have a job. I left corporate completely. It wasn't resonating with me. It wasn't what I wanted to ultimately do. And I took the leap of faith and said, you know what? I'm just going to stop everything and I'm just going to give everything to God. And I told God, I remember really clearly, I prayed one night and I said, God, if this is of you, and if this is what you want me to do, I'm going to start my dieta, my diet, to prepare and cleanse my body for this plant medicine. And if this is what I'm meant to do, you will provide for me. And I started my diet. It was no garlic, no onion, no animal products, no dairy. Dairy's animal products. No salt, no seasoning, just raw fruits, vegetables, and grains. I ended up doing this diet for 8 weeks. And 2 weeks into those 8 weeks, God provided me with a consulting gig because I was in finance and data automation prior to this. And he gave me a consulting gig that paid for everything to the cent. And it got really real for me. I was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And when I started my dieta, I was so weak. I had zero energy. I knew that if I drank coffee, it was gonna make my stomach hurt. It was gonna spike my cortisol. And matcha for me, matcha was never created to be a coffee alternative. And it was really disrupting my iron because matcha absorbs iron. But once you overdrink it and you drink too much, it starts to overabsorb iron that you don't even have. So I was like getting lightheaded and dizzy, and I was like, okay, I need to find something. So I had heard of yerba mate, which is from Argentina, and it was a great coffee alternative. But when I Googled it, underneath I saw Guayusa from Ecuador, and I was like, what? So I asked my uncle in Ecuador to send me Guayusa and Cacao because I was like, okay, one will be for daytime, one will be for nighttime to help me sleep and help relax me. And when I tell you, I genuinely feel like God sent me these herbs to carry me through this journey because I had the package that my uncle gave me of Guayusa and Cacao was just enough for me to get to a week before my ceremony, which is when you have to stop caffeine. And Guayusa gave me energy that I've never experienced before because it has L-theanine, which helps you focus, and theobromine, which lifts your mood. But it's balanced. All three are balanced: caffeine, L-theanine, and theobromine. So you get like this coffee level energy, but you're just so clear. You don't get any jitters or crash. And sneak peek, fast forward, I now source it from the indigenous communities that I even studied with in the Amazon. So I'll have it linked in my bio. And cacao husk, you will see how I found my cacao husk in this video as well. So really exciting, and I'm honestly so grateful. If it was not for herbs and plant medicine, I don't know how I would have been able to carry out this journey. But after 8 weeks of tasteless plant-based meals, I stopped watching TV, I stopped listening to music. I was really dedicated to healing my trauma. I had a lot of built up trauma, abandonment issues. I had many traumas, and I decided, you know what? I don't want to carry this forward because I know I want to be an entrepreneur. I know I want to create something. I don't know what it is yet, but I know that the only thing stopping me is my trauma. So that was my intention going into my ceremony. And I'm not going to go too deep into what I experienced during my ceremony. I did not have visions, hallucinations. Like, I didn't see a lot. My ceremony was very feeling based. I felt every single emotion that I was taught to sweep under the rug. I come from a very Latin household, and it was always like, be strong, keep going. But I had built up so many emotions I didn't deal with that when I sat in that ceremony, I felt every single one of them. And I purged a lot after feeling them. And I realized and I really felt how energy is really stored in the body. My ceremony was long, it was like 17 hours, but my integration period was even longer. It took me so long to relearn things, unlearn things, implement things that I learned in my ceremony. And that was where the change came, really. And now that it's been a year, I feel like I can finally share because time was the best teacher for me. I didn't learn overnight. Yes, I got a lot of information at once, and yes, I healed a lot of things at once, but it's the continuation of time that can only tell whether it truly helped you or not. And time was my biggest teacher. So we are going to get into the clips and yeah. I cannot believe that I'm here right now. Like, after 1 year of preparing excuses, I am finally in Quito. I am 4 days away from my ceremony, meeting with my shaman tomorrow. And honestly, getting on that plane, I was scared out of my mind. But as soon as I landed, I just had this sense of home, like I finally came home. So I just can't believe it. I can't believe that I started this diet and I made the intention to come here fully before even knowing how I was gonna get here, knowing what finances were gonna come to me in order to make this happen. And I spoke to God and I told him, I said, God, I'm gonna start this diet, just provide for me and I'll do the work. And he did. So I don't even know what to say. I really don't. I just can't believe it that this is finally happening for me, and I can slowly see my path, but I know I have to be present and I have to just continue what I'm doing, follow my intuition, let God lead me, because this is a solo journey, and not solo as in like I'm all alone, solo as in me and God. Because this entire trip, that's all I've been saying. I've just been saying, God, it's me and you. Because no one else is here with me. It's just me, because this is my purpose, my journey. I can't expect anyone to embark on something that they weren't called for. So let's do this. A year later, I found myself in Ecuador, in Quito, a place I had never truly experienced before, even though it was part of where I come from. And for the first time in a long time, I slowed down. This was my first solo trip ever. My mornings were gentle, soft light, quiet thoughts, and just me and my journal. There was no rushing, no pressure to be anything, just space. Space to heal, space to listen. Before my ceremony, I spent a few days exploring the city with my family. The architecture, the mountains, and the day before, everything changed. I was sitting on my bed when something found me. I came across a midwifery and natural gynecology course with Quechua women in the Amazon. And I didn't question it, I just knew. Something in my heart whispered, this is where you're meant to go. That moment was a seed, even before I understood what it was growing into. Then I made my way up a mountain to a quiet place surrounded by earth, animals, and sky. It felt like I was being held before I even understood why. And that night, everything opened. There are no words that I can fully explain what happens when you meet yourself completely, but what I can say is that I realized that God was never outside of me. I was never separate. The The light I was searching for was already within me, and that light was strong enough to create, strong enough to serve, strong enough to heal. For 17 hours I released layers of pain, of memories, of energy that had been living in my body without me even knowing. I reconnected, not just to myself, but to the earth. And I understood that the same way I am one with God, I'm one with the earth too. After that, everything became quieter, softer. I gave myself time to land, to feel my body again, and then I followed a pull. I went to the cloud forest of Ecuador. I stayed in a small treehouse, hidden in nature. And for the first time, rest became my practice. Not something I earned, but something I needed. Something sacred, because I realized rest is how we heal, especially as women. I nourished my body with whole foods, simple things. I walked barefoot on the ground, sat in silence, listened. There was a reserve nearby where I would spend hours walking, finding waterfalls, breathing in something that felt like life itself. And in all that solitude, I was never alone because I could hear God clearly. Not loudly, not in words, but in feeling, in knowing, in presence. And there was a dog who came to visit me every single day. And one day the owners followed and they asked me, "Are you here alone?" And I answered without thinking. And I said, "I'm never alone because I'm with God." And they smiled like they understood something deeper than words. And they welcomed me into their home. It was this beautiful, small little ranch heading to the reserve, labeled paradise. They cared for me like I was their own, fed me, held space for me, and reminded me that even in the unknown, we are always guided. Every night after my ceremony, my dreams were very, very vivid. Messages, symbols, pieces of something bigger. And one morning, I woke up with clarity, a truth that stayed with me. As women, we are meant to transmute. Energy flows through us, into the womb, and back into the earth, creating life over and over again. And that was a moment I painted what would now later become Se Luz. Not just a logo, but a remembrance of who we are. And somewhere in between, I felt free. A kind of freedom that no one could take from me. Because it didn't come from outside anymore, it came from within. So I headed into the city after days of solitude, and I fed hummingbirds, I laughed, I breathed differently, lighter, because I realized we are the ones who hold ourselves back. We are also the ones who can set ourselves free. And somehow I ended up at a cacao tour. I visited a cacao farm, but it was more than that. It was the first time I ever experienced cacao, not as just something we consume, but something that holds you. I found Cacao Husk tea here, and the way it nourished me felt different. Gentle, grounding, safe. It balanced me. Where Guayusa gave me energy, cacao softened me into rest, which is the season I was in. And in that balance, I felt held in a way I didn't even realize I needed. I watched the entire process, from the pod to its final form, and what stayed with me was the intention behind it all. Nothing was wasted. Every part of the cacao repurposed with care, with purpose, with respect. It felt sacred, like the plant itself was teaching me something. And in that moment, another seed was planted. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I knew this was something I was meant to work with. I spent one last night in Quito, a quiet pause before returning home. And then I went back to New York. It was still fast, it was still loud, but something in me had changed. The city was moving the same, but I wasn't. I was on a completely different frequency because I knew I hadn't gone all the way just to experience something. I went to become something, and now it was time to live it. I had received so much clarity, so much truth, so much energy, and I understood that energy isn't meant to sit still. It was meant to move. So I moved. I moved my body, I exercised, I allowed myself to release again and again. I worked closely with an indigenous womb coach, learning how to connect deeper with myself. I began using my voice, softly at first, and then fully, because I learned that our voice and our wombs are directly connected through the vagus nerve. And through sound, through vibration, I was able to regulate, to soften, to heal. I created, I painted, I let everything I had felt, everything I had seen flow through me, unfiltered, unpolished, and as real as it could get. And for the first time in my life, I became my main focus. Not out of selfishness, but out of necessity, because I finally understood when a woman pours into herself, everything around her transforms. So just an update on how I've been feeling. Integration is not exactly what I thought it would be. Definitely ups and downs. My highs are really, really high, but my lows, I wouldn't even say they're lows, they're just tests. One thing about my ceremony was that it was really, really, really tough. I had a very tough ceremony. Not a bad ceremony, but a very tough ceremony. But I felt so much love and the liberation and the freedom and the strength that I felt after and that I embodied after my ceremony is something that no one can take away from me. And that's what I use to keep going every day. And one thing I really learned during my ceremony also was how to be gentle with myself, and that the survival instincts in me were no longer serving me. So I had to fully surrender, and learning how to do that in ceremony made it that much easier to do it in my everyday to God. So it's a beautiful thing. Like, there's certain feelings that I just don't remember in terms of like my fears of abandonment, my anxieties. I just don't really know what they feel like anymore, but it's something that in order for me to continue, I have to constantly be feeding my soul and constantly comfort myself and constantly move my body, support my body. And it's like when you get your dream body and now you have to maintain it. For me, I feel like I've achieved my dream mindset, and it's something that I have to maintain, and it's something that I have to continuously look within to find my own inner peace and continue to embody that. So that is an update. Another thing is, for me, I feel like I'm building something. I definitely am starting my own brand for women and awakening the divine, sacred feminine within women. But I know that in order for me to share that, I have to embody it, and I have to practice it in a way that I become that. And part of that is also realizing that as women, we are masculine and we are feminine. And for me, for the longest time, I was so in my masculine, and I was it was just because I was always in survival mode that I saw my masculinity as a horrible, terrible thing. But in order for you to be able to embody your divine, sacred feminine, you have to kind of teach yourself how to use your masculinity not to be a power force in a negative way, but use your masculinity to protect that divine, sacred feminine through boundaries, through the way you carry yourself. So it's like a switch that you turn on and off when you feel like you are in an environment that you need to protect yourself. That is where that masculinity comes in. And it doesn't have to be rude, it does not have to be too forward. It is just a presence, and it's something that you embody to gently and graciously, as a woman, protect yourself. And we don't have to be aggressive about it, we just have to be stern and firm in it. So that is what I've learned. That is my journey so far. I'm 2 weeks out of my ceremony, and I feel like I'm doing great. I feel like I'm getting there. Obviously, no day is perfect, no life is perfect, but I'm very proud of myself, and every single day I celebrate myself and my wins, and that's all I can do. So I'm gonna eat something. Hopefully I can get some energy going, because I am exhausted, I won't lie. I have been moving my body a lot, from like not moving my body at all during my recovery period to now is a lot, but it feels amazing, and I just need to be gentle with myself. So, and then life called me somewhere unexpected, which was Namibia. What started as a work trip became something so much deeper. That trip is what allowed me to fund the very beginning of Se Luz, to take everything that lived inside me and start bringing it into form. But beyond the work, something else happened. I reconnected with my husband, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we met each other again. Not as who we used to be, but as who we both became. There was space, there was softness, there was understanding, and in that space, we truly fell in love again. We gave each other permission to grow individually, but also together, and that changed everything. I spent time in northern Namibia, a place that has always felt like home to me, a place deeply rooted in tradition, in rhythm, in truth, and I continued my practice every morning I woke up and chose myself. I moved my body, I stayed present, I made Guayusa and shared it with family. I created, I explored, I allowed myself to be inspired by the land, by the people, the stillness, and it was harvest season, so everything felt abundant, alive. I ate from the earth, cooked with intention, received in a way I never had before, but more than anything, I was surrounded by love. Pure, grounded, unconditional love. And without realizing it at that time, that moment was my last pause. Because soon after, everything began to move fast. I returned to New York with my husband, and within a week, I was already building, designing packaging, bringing ideas into form, turning vision into something tangible. And just like that, I was on another flight back to Ecuador. But this time, I wasn't going to find myself, I was going to build. I finalized my packaging, sent my samples, put everything into production, and then I followed the call even deeper, into the Amazon. To learn, to listen, to sit with women who carried this wisdom for generations. Midwifery, natural gynecology, plant medicine, not from books, but from the source. To understand how we as women can be supported, held, and guided through every phase of our lives. And that is where everything truly began. In the next part of this journey, I will take you into the Amazon, into the heart of it all, where healing became something deeper than personal. It became ancestral.